All right, welcome everybody back to the Rural Electric Cooperative Co-lab. I'm Tom Llewellyn, Executive Director with Shareable, a working partner of the Rural Power Coalition that is hosting this series. Today, we are going to be focusing on an introduction to inclusive utility investments with Kai Palmer-Dunning and Camille Mins. And just want to let everybody know, as usual, we are recording this session. We will be posting the recording and any links that are shared in the chat. Any other resources that are shared throughout the session, we'll be posting to Canvas afterwards. If you have any questions about Canvas, you can stay on at the end, and our organizing team is going to stick around for another 15 minutes or so. If you've got any questions about electric co-ops or about this series, you can stick around at that point in time as well, and we'll be happy to help you out. If you look in the list of participants, if you see a lightning bolt next to any of those names, that's all members of the organizing team. You can see Aaron and Paige on there as well. And so if you have any questions, feel free to message us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kai and Camille.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this session on inclusive utility investments and their role in the rural electric cooperative space. It's great to be here with so many new and familiar co-op leaders and members, energy justice advocates, and other practitioners. My name is Kai Palmer-Dunning, and I'm the Senior Associate on the Building Decarbonization team at Clean Energy Works, and it's a pleasure to join you today.
Hello, everyone, and I am Camille Mins, and I am the Senior Associate of Just Energy Transition at Clean Energy Works. So first of all, it is an absolute honor for us to be with you today because we are all aware of the intense demands on everyone's time, but also the pressures facing the communities that each and every one of you know best. And we are here today to explore, as Kai mentioned, how inclusive utility investments can help co-ops advance equitable energy access, address the climate crisis, and uphold cooperative values. As you'll see in a moment, the Rural Power Coalition worked with Shareable to produce a handout and a short video to help community champions explain the concept to more cooperative member owners, board members, and staff. And so today's session is a part of that ongoing endeavor. And we thank both of those organizations, both the Rural Power Coalition and Shareable, for tapping us to support the coalition members with this session today. Our aim by the end of this session is to help you in your pursuit of understanding and the pursuit of your aims around understanding more about inclusive utility investments. And we welcome your active engagement in the chat and through reactions and in the discussion that we hope will follow as we move through, some of these remarks and into some of the introductions. And so, yeah, by the end of this session, we hope that you have a better understanding of inclusive utility investments, what they are, how they work, if you do not know already, how they advance energy justice and the role that they play, and more importantly, too, how to advocate for the implementation and the scaling of inclusive financial solutions and inclusive utility investment programs. So let's dive in. Next slide, please, Kai. And so at Clean Energy Works, our mission is to speed up the utility adoption of inclusive financial solutions, namely inclusive utility investments, to open access to the clean energy economy, especially to households who have been historically underserved. For more than a decade, we've been working with co-ops, utilities, and community leaders, among others, to scale inclusive utility investments as a tool for equitable energy access and climate action. And so communities served by rural electric co-ops have led the way, advocating for inclusive utility investments and winning them, with thousands of households getting upgraded as a result. In fact, some of the largest and longest running inclusive utility investment programs are run by electric co-ops, starting in Kansas. And you'll see a bit of that in a short minute. And so there are other electric co-ops who've also offered inclusive utility investments before deciding to end their offers, but for various different reasons. And so these experiences are important to us and to electric co-ops and to their members as we work to understand the barriers to a more inclusive, clean, energy economy, including local workforce development, local capacity for making the investment in grid edge upgrades, and the concern among utility managers when it comes to helping people save money through energy efficiency upgrades, in contrast to general enthusiasm for electrification, which results in higher sales. So again, over the course of our time together, we'll discuss these and more. But up front, we want to be clear that inclusive utility investments are not a panacea. They are a solution that electric co-ops can use in combination with other tactics to generate economic benefits for member owners. Next slide, please. And so now, as we progress through this conversation, we want to better understand your thoughts and your perspective on this work and on this topic. And so we'll be asking a series of poll questions throughout our presentation today. The first of which is to gauge your understanding. So how familiar are you with inclusive utility investments? There is a QR code on screen that you would be able to slide, and you can also join at that link, slido.com, and enter in the code that you see there, hashtag 3973106. Again, that's slido.com, hashtag, and then the code you enter after you get to that slide is hashtag 3973106. And so this is a live poll where we really want to grasp, what folks are thinking and their understanding, again, of inclusive utility investments. If this is your first time, this session is, largely for you. We definitely want to make sure that you leave this session with sufficient knowledge and maybe some curiosity to move forward, to reach out to us, to inquire more, that you're interested. If you have direct experience implementing or advocating for inclusive utility investments, our hope is that you join us in the conversation and in the dialogue and in sharing your experiences with others. Okay. And I don't know where we are for time, but I definitely want to keep this going.
Just a few more moments or two, but thank you so much for those who have participated in the poll so far. It's really good to get an understanding of where people's understanding and familiarity is around inclusive utility investments.
Okay. Definitely looks like the majority of folks joining us, or at least those who have filled out the poll, have never heard about inclusive utility investments today. So this is exciting. This is good because we have tailored this more or less to come in at a ground level and to provide you with some of the basics. Okay, this is wonderful. Okay, and so thank you so much for those responses. What we're going to do now is jump into a video, like we said, Rural Power Coalition had curated to highlight the challenges and the opportunities in rural energy systems and how inclusive utility investments more specifically can address those. And so this has some background noise, but no voiceover. And so we encourage you to pay close attention to the words that you see on the screen. Let's play. Wonderful. So yeah, lots of information there, but I promise and hope, I should say, that by the end of this presentation, we'll be able to connect the dots between a lot of what you would have seen just now. And so energy burden, which is very significant to this work, is a key reason that we work to advance inclusive financial solutions for clean energy upgrades. We just saw in the Rural Power Coalition video that rural Americans spend 40% more on energy than those living in urban areas. And this gap is even larger when you consider income levels. As you all likely know, rural electric co-op areas, rural electric co-op areas, the energy burden is more than just a statistic. Across the country, it is, right? But it is a daily reality where high energy costs means that families have to choose between paying their utility bill and putting food on the table. And so older, less efficient homes throughout the country, the rising older housing stock that we see, drive up energy burden, and high upfront costs put upgrades out of reach for many families. That, along with systemic inequalities, make it difficult for low-income households to access clean energy solutions. And that is a part of the challenge that we're seeing. What is on the slide here is a graphic from a report, 2018 report from the ACEEE, highlighting rural energy burden by the region. It also notes that about 41% of households in rural areas have incomes below 200% of the federal poverty level, compared with roughly 1/3 of urban households. And energy burden, as we should come to know it, isn't just a financial issue. It's a health issue, a safety issue, and a quality of life issue. And so inefficient homes lead to higher energy costs, but also to increased health risks, especially for vulnerable populations like the elderly and young children. And so the vital energy efficiency upgrades that we advocate for, that we recognize are necessary, they aren't cheap. And so that results in an energy efficiency financing gap. Many households earn too much to qualify for government assistance, but too little to access traditional financing options like loan. Falling into what Dr. Tony Reams, former Deputy Director of Energy Justice and former Principal Deputy Director for State and Community Energy Efficiency Programs at the Department of Energy Environment, DOE, described as the donut hole. And so this donut hole that we see here in financing will reflect that. And it expands on the quote from Dr. Reams that on eligibility grounds alone across the country, we are likely leaving millions of households out of the transition to a cleaner energy future. And what we want is not just a cleaner energy future, but one that is just and equitable. And so the result, again, that when families are stuck with high energy bills and no way to make the upgrades work, with proper inclusive financing solutions, these could save them money and also improve the quality of life. And we do have another slide, so I hope you kept that tab open. I think you can get to the next slide. So yes, we are still at slido.com. The code is still there. And so now what we want to get in or have a grasp of is, what do you believe is the primary barrier preventing low to moderate income households in your community from accessing energy efficiency upgrades? Is it systemic inequalities regarding either credit history or income disparities? Is it the high upfront costs for the upgrades themselves? Is it perhaps just the lack of awareness about available programs, whether they come with a cost or not? Or the restrictive eligibility criteria for assistance? And yeah, and so we have Kyle in the comments. Yes, what option is not there is that it is all of the above. More than likely, but we really want to get a grasp of this because so many communities and so many of you who have experience working in different communities can recognize where the challenge itself might be, whether you have programs that address high upfront costs, like you may live and exist in an area and work in an area where an inclusive utility investment program exists, which would address that high upfront cost. And so maybe it's just, again, the lack of awareness about what's out there. But we see about, again, 78% of folks who have answered the poll recognizing that it is the high upfront costs for the upgrades, and 56% noting the lack of awareness about available programs. You can give more time if needed.
And thank you, everybody. Continue for your participation in the polls. And as we kind of get deeper into what inclusive utility investments are, we hope to kind of address some of those, all of the above barriers that people have indicated that are preventing a lot of low to moderate income households from participating. So we'll go ahead and close the poll and move on to the next slide. Great. Well, now let's look at what inclusive utility investments are and how they can help address barriers to access into energy efficiency upgrades. So an inclusive utility investment are a financial solution for distributed energy resources, including energy efficiency, via a tariff for site-specific utility investment and cost recovery approved by the utility's regulatory authority, and the design is designed to ensure the net annual cost savings for participants. Simply put, inclusive utility investments is a financial solution where the utility pays upfront for clean energy upgrades and recovers the cost through a set charge on the member owner's monthly utility bill that is less than the estimated savings. As this is an investment from the utility based on the amount of savings estimated to be generated by the upgrades, it is not a loan or other form of debt taken on by the person who lives at the site of the upgrade. This means the investment can be made without requiring credit checks or other types of personal debt underwriting criteria. The utility investment model aligns perfectly with cooperative principles by ensuring equitable service, community benefits, and the local accountability. Now let's break down the core components of inclusive utility investments to understand better how they work. So there are four core components of inclusive utility investments. The first being the utility makes an upfront investment, so no upfront payments are required for the member owner, and the investment is for all cost-effective upgrades, and it's ensuring that that ensures the measures are agreed upon between the member owner and the utility. Second, it's affordable cost recovery. The costs are recovered through a site-specific charge unique to that location, and the amount is capped at 80% of the estimated savings from the upgrades. Next, there's no credit checks, which allows for accessibility regardless of income or credit history. And finally, there's a site-specific tariff. That tariff applies automatically to the property until the utility cost recovery is complete. Next, let's look at the kind of customer journey through the program or through the program as people access into inclusive utility investments. So simply put, it mirrors a lot of other energy efficiency programs offered by the utility. First, the utility identifies the member owner with the strongest value proposition, i.e. member owners with fuel oil, propane, or electric resistance, are in need of major weatherization upgrades. Next, the member owner schedules a free or low-cost home energy assessment. Then the utility or the program operator creates a scope of work that identifies all the upgrades that could save money at the site. Next, once the customer accepts that offer, the contractor installs the upgrades to the satisfaction of the utility with the member's approval, and the utility pays for that work. And then finally, the member owner pays for the upgrades over time with an affordable charge on the utility bill at that location and enjoys the benefits of the improvements to their home. Over the past decade, we've seen significant growth in inclusive utility investments with success stories from cooperatives like Rural Electric in North Carolina and Ouachita Electric in Arkansas. Clean Energy Works has been advancing inclusive utility investments since 2014. With the yellow dots, you'll see the first map from 2013 are rural electric co-ops that were instrumental in leading the way. Since then, utilities in more places across the country have adopted similar tariffs to offer inclusive utility investments. Based on the data from a 2022 study conducted by Energy Efficiency Institute, the inventor of the pay-as-you-save system, or PAYS, utilities using PAYS have invested $44 million in upgrades at around 5,900 sites with a total cost of upgrades over $50 million. For Roanoke and Ouachita, 90% of the members who received an offer with no upfront copay accepted the offer. which is a much higher acceptance rate than other financial solutions. However, that acceptance rate did fall to 63% when it was required, when upfront co-payment was required, demonstrating the importance of ensuring the package of upgrades is cost-effective for members. In the ecosystem of energy efficiency financing and funding sources, inclusive utility investments is a unique financial solution. Traditional financing models like loans and leases often require people to take on consumer debt, be screened for credit checks, or have a lien placed on their property. Benefit programs funded by taxpayers and ratepayers funds can also be limited or restrictive. On-bill financing and on-bill repayment also constitute loans, which either the utility or a third-party financier that are paid over time on a member owner's utility bill and incur some of the same penalties as loans if member owners miss a payment. Inclusive utility investments are different from on-bill financing models. The utility makes an upfront investment in energy efficiency upgrades at the property rather than lending to the member owner. They also use a site-specific tariff-based cost recovery model that doesn't have a debt obligation for current or future member owners at the site. Strong consumer protections like those in the pay-as-you-save or pays are designed to ensure affordability and immediate savings. These protections avoid the pitfalls of programs like property assessed clean energy or PACE by guarding against the problems that like contractor conflict of interest. Electric cooperatives with experience offering inclusive utility investments have faced challenges like barriers to upgrades. These barriers have resulted in a need for major repairs to assure the health and safety of current and future building occupants. Also, some utilities have struggled to find money-saving upgrades or apply incentives for multiple benefit streams. We work with utilities on combining funding from multiple sources to help buy down the upfront cost of money-saving upgrades. So now we'll kind of look at some of the available upgrades through inclusive utility investment programs or inclusive utility investments and how they can kind of work to make the upfront cost of the upgrades come down. So most offers of inclusive utility investments began with energy efficiency, weatherization, and heating and cooling upgrades. So those are the first three red circles. Then they expanded to smart thermostats, air source heat pumps, and heat pump hot water heaters. So see the next two circles represent some of the electrification and additional upgrades that are offered. Adding demand response enabled technologies can provide additional value to member owners and utilities. So by adding rooftop solar and battery storage, bidirectional charging, and other ways of managing the peak demand on the grid, you can actually add that value into the inclusive utility investment offer to bring down the overall costs and avoid upfront costs. So controllable devices like smart thermostats, hot water heater load controls, and battery storage can be made available to utilities at set times during the year to manage peak load and drive demand flexibility. The value generated from the management of these appliances can be paid to the member owner or included as a value in the inclusive utility investment offer. They can help expand the value of possible value of upgrades that qualify as cost-effective in the upgrade package for member owners. More importantly, the upgrades can be bundled together to reduce demand for new energy generation like gas and coal peaker plants, a model known as virtual power plants, which you'll hear more about on the next collab, actually. Finding innovative ways to upgrade buildings is core to make the clean energy transition accessible for all member owners in electric cooperative districts. So now we'll have one last poll to kind of get a better sense from you of what are some of the benefits you think inclusive utility investments can offer to making them more compelling and advancing energy equity in your community. So we're starting to get some results in. Thank you for participating.
Yeah, if anyone, might be joining on their phone or is otherwise unable to kind of view the screen or participate in the poll, we will just say that, so the options, with the question again, which benefit of inclusive utility investments do you find most compelling for advancing energy equity in your community? No debt or credit checks for member owners, guaranteed bill savings, which was the cost recovery capped at the 80% of savings for most programs, accessibility regardless of income level, and then alignment with cooperative principles, equity, local accountability. And we are seeing that a significant amount of those who have answered so far recognize the accessibility of the programs, regardless of income level. What's also not included here, but I believe as Kai mentioned, is also accessibility regardless of home ownership status. Definitely one of the perks of inclusive utility investments is its accessibility to renters. Again, because of the site-specific charge or tariff of an upgrade. And so, okay, we see results are still coming in. But yeah, as we look at sort of the housing market across the nation and the amount of folks that rent versus own, it's very uncommon that programs allow themselves energy efficiency upgrades to be accessed by renters. And so not having to rely on home ownership status as someone who rents personally is very valuable. And it sort of opens your mind to think about, okay, I can also take a part in the clean energy economy. And I also don't have to face or bear high energy bills while having no control over what happens to the home and the space that I live in. So, all right, this is good. Thank you for that, Kai. And so members of Rural Power Coalition have long championed inclusive utility investments as a strategy that supports, again, affordability alongside the need and the calls for large utility scale investments. More specifically, strategy number 3 of Rural Power Coalition's current policy platform calls for increased federal support for the broad adoption of inclusive utility investment in energy efficiency and electrification upgrades. And it names inclusive utility investments specifically. And the goal with this is to comprehensively address the energy affordability crisis in rural America by ensuring that everyone, again, can upgrade their homes and save money through tariffs for site-specific investments with site-specific cost recovery. I'll pause here to also just highlight, as Erin is saying, there's a lot of information coming. So please capture any thoughts or questions that you have in the chat as they are coming up. But as we've outlined, many people simply cannot afford the upfront costs for energy upgrades, even though these upgrades generate significant value for both the utility and its member owners. By reducing energy use, these upgrades save money for households and enhance energy resilience for the entire community. But without a way to overcome, again, the upfront cost barrier, millions of households will be and are left behind. When households save money on energy bills, they have more to spend on other essentials. And we all can imagine and we know what those can be and what it feels like. And this strengthens local economies. And when co-ops invest in energy demand flexibility, they're better equipped to integrate higher levels of clean power in their power supply, as well as increasing the frequency of extreme temperature events. And so what we want to highlight here are, the various organizations, coalition groups that are a part of Rural Power Coalition that have supported the advancement of Strategy 3 and who we are immensely proud to be in community with as we continue to, again, work and shape and advocate for inclusive utility investments. Next slide. And so we are wrapping up, but before we leave, we want to acknowledge the leadership and the advocacy of co-ops, community members, and local champions who have driven this movement forward, including many from the Rural Power Coalition and from RPC and the organizations that we previously highlighted. This year, January 2025, Clean Energy Works, we launched our Inclusive Utility Investment Fellowship, with the goal of building local capacity for energy justice initiatives with fellows from Minnesota, Missouri, Alaska, North Carolina, and a few other states. And so we want to take the time to thank and express immense gratitude to our current fellows and their organizations. And we've highlighted those who are RPC members. Cure Minnesota's Eric Huddlestad, Amber Atkins and Maisha Johnson from Renew Missouri. And we thank them for their dedication, as well as the folks highlighted in blue who represent RPC members from our Fellowship Advisory Board who were instrumental in supporting the development and the crafting of the fellowship alongside Clean Energy Works staff. And so these champions, both the individuals and their organizations, have been vital in advocating for policies and programs that support rural electric cooperatives and their members. And their support of and involvement in our fellowship and in this work in general is critical to ensuring that inclusive utility investments can be scaled across the country in a way that meets community and residents' needs. And so this is a 12-month fellowship. And so at the end of the fellowship, through their work, through their advocacy, we'll be able to, again, expand their understanding of inclusive utility investments while we continue to learn more about the landscapes that they operate in, and again, shape how we make this mechanism work for as many people across the country as we can. And so once again, thank you. Again, to the individuals, but also to the organizations and to Rural Power Coalition. And so, yeah, we are done. And we hope that this introduction has been helpful to you for considering whether inclusive utility investments would help accelerate the deployment of clean energy upgrades for member owners in the places that you yourselves know best. And so to explore this work further, again, we hope for those of you for who this was the first time hearing about this concept. We hope this is the beginning of the conversation and not the end of it, and that we have the opportunity to continue on. And so we recommend you using, the top internet search result that you see for inclusive utility investment, which oftentimes, maybe my algorithm is biased, is Clean Energy Works. But also we have a forthcoming utility guide from the Smart Electric Power Alliance that our team had co-authored, of which Kai was an instrumental part of, and that we look forward to sharing. And I believe it may have actually just launched today. So we'll have that link going out. And so as we move to talk with you and to discuss more and to answer the questions that we hope you have, no question too small or minute. We want to emphasize that, again, inclusive utility investments alone are not sufficient to assure that everyone can get essential money saving upgrades. And that is why we work with cooperatives to combine multiple value streams and multiple financing structures generated by building electrification and virtual power plants, not only energy efficiency. And so we thank you for your time and for your attention. And we hope that you get in touch with either of us at any time and to continuing this conversation. So thank you all once again. And thank you to Rural Power Coalition, RPC, and Shareable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that great detail. And questions are starting to come in. Please do add your questions to the chat, and I'll be pulling those questions out and asking both Camille and Kai. To start, are there key strategies that you would like to share for groups that want to advocate for either to their co-ops or on the state level for increasing these programs?
I definitely think, and I'll start with where I am based, Kai, and hand it over to you. But I definitely think in terms of education, inclusive utility investments does kind of, it sits in that divide between policy and finance. And oftentimes people hear finance and it can, feel a bit overwhelming, and they're like, I'm not a finance expert. I don't know what to do. But through the work that we do, through the resources that we develop and co-develop, again, the video that we shared earlier, education definitely starts there. So educating yourselves a bit more, clarifying any misconceptions, because like we say, we are not alone. And I actually have on a shirt that we use that it won't show up, but it's like a UFO. And it also says at the bottom, we are not alone. Because we aren't, but that is often a very common misconception of inclusive utility investments. And so engage with us, right? And clarify those questions, educate your team, your staff, member owners on the information that exists out there, and especially from the existing programs who have, developed best practices, who have gone through the cycle, and learned what they can and what works best and what may, need some tweaking. That's where I think it definitely begins. Kai, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add that communities and member owners of electric cooperatives are the experts of what is and what isn't working at the community level. So if there are financial programs for energy efficiency that aren't reaching customers, or that there's solutions to address energy burden through energy efficiency and electrification, make sure you're being vocal about those. And if inclusive utility investments present a solution that could help make these things more accessible, definitely reach out to us, reach out to other co-ops that have gone through this process to really help kickstart that process.
Great. Well, I'm going to start asking some questions from the chat, so please continue to put those in there. This first one comes from Bree Nisley, who has presented in this series already, and is saying, this isn't specific to inclusive utility investments per se, but she's heard that from some co-ops that residential weatherization programs don't provide enough return on the co-op side of the investment, which includes both, everything, the hard costs of doing those improvements, but then also there can be a large amount of administrative burden. She's wondering, can you share how you all respond to these concerns when working with utility leaders who may be resource constrained?
I'm going to start out. Camille?
Yeah, you can go.
Great, sure, yeah. So I think one of the things to look at is yeah, as I think as the person pointed out, weatherization and other types of other energy efficient upgrades aren't always cost effective for member owners and other utility customers because they require an upfront cost. So it's really important for the utility and the contractor that's working with the member owner to assess their property, provide like a comprehensive energy audit to really figure out what are the most cost-effective upgrades, and if if a copay is required, finding ways to braid other types of funding in to really address that gap that the copay might require the person to provide upfront capital for.
Yeah, I know that the term we often are thinking about as we engage with different programs, and again, rural co-ops are definitely some of the utilities that we do engage with, as well as IOUs. Project economics is certainly something that comes up. How do we make this not just, when we're talking about cost recovery for the utilities and getting these programs up and running? And this is why I also say, well, while I point to the existing co-ops that have done this work, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri, who have been able to figure out a bit better what works for them as they kind of tweak things. Kai mentioned the case study. I think that may have been Wachita, where they initially had no upfront costs, and then perhaps fell into some challenge and then went back, but then realized that upfront costs, or removing the upfront cost barrier was where they really needed to make that a benefit of the program that actually stuck. And so then moving to tweak some of the other components of the program. But incredible question. Thank you.
Mm. And I'm wondering, can you
thread?
Yep. Yep. And Liz, who presented last week, jumped in and answered some of this question. But can you speak to, for those that are not able to see the chat, the differences between state level tariffs and whether or not they're the same as federal level tariffs, and where and or how that might change or differentiate from a co-op level tariff?
Sure, I can jump in on that. Yeah, so the types of tariffs that we're talking about are very different than the federal tariffs that are applied to imports to encourage domestic manufacturing, domestic development of products. The tariffs that we're talking about are with utility and the commission, or the governing body for the utility that it's a term or condition for the rates that are agreed upon for the utility to provide electric and gas service. So it's not a charge that's added. It's not a tax or a charge in the sense that that federal tariffs are. It's a more so a condition or term that's agreed upon with the utility and the customers.
And I've got another one here from Philip, who was one of our presenters last week at Renew Missouri, asking, we've seen an issue with monopoly pricing for HVAC systems requiring a copay for PACE programs in Missouri. Has this been an issue for any other utilities in other states offering an inclusive utility investment program?
Yeah, I guess monopoly pricing as in kind of like the agreed upon pricing for the HVAC that's being offered. Uh, this just kind of getting a better sense of what monopoly pricing is meant there.
Yeah, Philip, do you want to
Hey.
come off of mute? There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were seeing an issue where um, suppliers were actually in agreement in, it seemed like colluding to set a standard price so that we actually couldn't get advantage of economies of scale and, buying and getting more supply of HVAC systems in the state of Missouri. And this is something that we didn't know, prior to looking at pay as you save for our investor-owned utilities. So I was just curious if other states had that problem, if that's something that, others had been dealing with and implementing their programs, or if that was unique to what we were seeing.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I don't really have an answer off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to kind of look and follow up. But in terms of a potential benefit of kind of bulk purchasing equipment is that you might be able to bring the overall cost of the equipment if you're able to purchase in large enough quantities. So that's something that utilities or program operators and utilities can look at. But in terms of a monopoly price that makes it restrictive, that's something I have to look at if other utilities or other states have done with their programs.
All right, thank you. Got another question from Paige here asking if inclusive utility investments referred to by other terms, or are there IUIs referred to by other terms that folks might see on their bills as surcharges, or how would they know if that was something that their co-op was offering already?
I'll start with this and definitely say that the first and the best way is to obviously engage with the co-op to find out and to ask more specifically. In the broader landscape, though, again, when I say education and when I made that comment earlier around misconceptions, there's also challenges with terminology. So inclusive utility investments, you may have heard us say throughout this inclusive financial solutions, of which we believe that also falls under. Pay as you save is this very specific and license model, any kind of inclusive utility investment program. Out there as well, you may hear or be familiar with tariffed on-bill financing or on-bill financing. And then there is tariff on bill refinancing or tariff on bill loans. And we at Clean Energy Works and what we advocate for with inclusive utility investments, we steer away from any language or any terms that imply payback, especially by the consumer to the utility. And so that's why we do, or we again move away from refinancing, payback, and again, loans. Those are terms that we avoid because we are specifically not alone and are positioning and have positioned ourselves as a mechanism that does not work to pass on debt to the consumer. And so on a bill surcharge, it could perhaps be any one of those program terms, but I think it's definitely important to inquire with your utility and to ask that specific question. Do you refer to this as a loan? Is this something that a consumer will have to pay back as opposed to the utility taking the onus on them to recover the costs through the savings? Kai, I know you were, again, just involved in the SEPA financing toolkit, so you're definitely in the weeds a lot with the terminology. So yeah, if you have anything else you'd like to add, please do.
Yeah, and I think the most important part and core component of inclusive utility investment is the site-specific utility investment with site-specific cost recovery. So the utility is making an investment in the grid edge upgrades at the home instead of making a loan to the homeowner or to the person at the property in order to purchase upgrades and then repay the utility. So that's not what inclusive utility investment is. So that's why we kind of stay away from the terminology of on-bill financing or on-bill loans, because we want to make very clear that this is not a loan. It doesn't have loan terms. It's not a form of debt. It's a utility investment.
Great, thank you. And as we start to get a little bit towards the end here, just want to point to a survey which Aaron has posted in the chat just to give us feedback for this series. We'd appreciate that. We definitely read every response and integrate things into future sessions as we are able. I've got a question here. I'm wondering if there are, if kind of current and upcoming federal cuts could affect new inclusive utility investment programs.
Yeah, Camille, I don't know if you want to start out on kind of the work with communities that your team is doing, and if any of the federal cuts to EPA funding might be impacting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I definitely was dropping our emails in the chat for, again, folks to follow up, as we don't have the presentation up anymore. But I will say that if we did have that map up, I think one of the things that we have been what we've noticed about inclusive utility investments in terms of the locations and the kinds of utilities that have been able to adopt them, a lot of them have been, again, rural electric co-ops who work with investor-owned utilities. And we have watched over the past decade of doing this work that a lot of inclusive utility investment programs, because of the general focus on just trying to advance affordability and more resilient homes and support the weatherization of homes as we look to navigate extreme weather and, comfort for folks, they've been a bit resilient in this work. With a lot of the community-based organizations and partners, however, that we do work with and we do rely on to be in continuous conversation with when we want to shape programs and really understand what is it that folks are experiencing, what consumer protections do we really need to amplify and tweak and work on, what sort of, policy support do we need to also, get on the bandwagon of or advocate for? Those groups have definitely seen and expect to see, continued restraint from federal funding and funding cuts. And so we are just positioning ourselves and continuing to be and strategizing alongside them of how to navigate this landscape. But again, I think that regardless of any political administration, there is always, a desire for making energy affordable for Americans and for advancing, again, the efficiency of homes, right? And again, there's workforce development that is a part of this, and there is also working with rural Americans as well as those who are in more urban areas. And so that is the best way that I'm able to answer this question at this moment. Please let me know if I've missed anything or if there's anything else to add.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that obviously it's very frustrating and challenging that there have been a lot of cuts at the federal level with funding like GGRF and other funding sources through EPA and DOE being challenged at the federal level. But fortunately, with inclusive investments, the capital source is pretty diverse. You can get the funding to develop develop a utility program from a lot of different places. RESP funding is still available to be used for inclusive utility investment programs, as well as other sources like green banks, working with CDFIs, other funders in the field. So the diversity of capital sources makes inclusive utility investments beneficial.
And I think on a related question I got sent in the chat here, um, is there anything that can be done, be it regulation, oversight, transparency, or otherwise, to make sure that the surchargers, are fair and not predatory?
Via regulation, I mean, I will say there are various pathways for how we scale and how different communities and utilities scale and adopt inclusive utility investment programs. When we look at legislation or, getting to that level, we are always and continuously trying to understand and focus largely around consumer protections, right? That is a big part of the work that we do. And when we are in conversation with whether it is commissions or utilities themselves, it is in refining and making clear the language around consumer protections. And we, as well as many other organizations out there, remain staunch advocates of ensuring that, we want these programs to advance. We want them to advance in a way where the model is not tainted and where we are able to secure non-exploitive surcharge percentages and how much is actually recovered from the savings. And so I say that it is a continuous process, but it varies, again, state by state, depending on the groups that are there. That varies, and exactly what we hold in legislation versus just in the, more specific crafting of a program at a utility level.
All right. And I think on that note, we're going to wrap things up, and want to thank Camille and Kai for coming and presenting and sharing and answering all these great questions. Thank you, everybody who's been posting questions in the chat. We really appreciate the participation in these sessions and in the participation with the polls as well. We'll be back here same time next week for engaging rural electric cooperative member owners with Dr. Catherine Robinson, Program Director at One Voice, Deborah Opie, Campaign Manager for the Georgia Conservation Voters, and Basil Williams, Senior Manager of Member Services at the Roanoke Cooperative. So it's going to be great to get a perspective from of electric co-op as well. The link to that and all of our upcoming sessions has just been posted in the chat, and we encourage folks to register. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to stay on for the next 15 minutes. If anybody has specific questions about Canvas or this collab in general, you can stick around and we will answer those questions and get everybody who needs to be oriented. But until next time, thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again.